They say the coldest thing is not a Chicago winter, but a woman's eyes when she realizes her life is a joke. I did not scream when I caught my best friend dancing naked for my husband in my own living room. My heart did not break. It froze into a weapon. They think I am the victim, but I am the director of this finale, and the front row audience, the very people who raised that traitor. My name is Imogen Brightwell, and for the last 10 years, I have defined myself by two things: my ability to see patterns where others see chaos, and my absolute refusal to let anything surprise me. As the director of strategy at Novus Orion, a position that usually requires a blood pressure medication prescription and a lack of empathy, I am paid to predict disasters before they manifest. Yet, as I navigated my silent electric sedan through the winding, tree-lined roads of our exclusive neighborhood, the only disaster I was predicting was the potential spoilage of the truffle cheese I had smuggled past customs. I was returning from London 48 hours ahead of schedule. The merger with the European tech giant had closed not with a whimper, but with a handshake that would secure my stock options for the next decade. I felt a rare, bubbling champagne-like effervescence in my chest. I was 34 years old, I was powerful, and I was going home to the two men who made the grind worth it: Declan, my husband, and Lucas, our 6-year-old son. Lucas was staying at my mother's house for the weekend, a convenient arrangement that meant tonight was supposed to be mine and Declan's. I had imagined the scene a dozen times on the flight over the Atlantic. I would walk in, the house would be quiet, and I would wake him up. We would drink the wine I brought back. We would talk, really talk, without the distraction of his failing architectural drafts or my constant conference calls. I wanted to be the wife he deserved, the softer version of Imogen that I kept locked away in a safe deposit box during business hours. The car glided up the long driveway, the gravel crunching softly under the tires like the sound of breaking sugar. The house stood before me, a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel that Declan had designed and I had paid for. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing. It was supposed to be dark. I frowned, tapping the screen of my phone. My thumb hovered over the smart home app. According to my settings, the house should have been in away mode, the heating should have been lowered to save energy, and the lights should have been off. Instead, the interface glowed with a status that made my stomach tighten ambient mode. Someone was home. My first thought was not betrayal, it was concern. Had Declan come home early from his site visit? Was he sick? I guided the car into the garage, wincing as the automatic door hummed too loudly in the stillness of the night. I sat there for a moment, gripping the leather steering wheel. The silence of the garage was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I grabbed my purse, leaving the suitcase in the trunk. I did not need luggage to say hello to my husband. I entered the house through the mudroom door, punching in the security code with practiced muscle memory. The beep of the keypad seemed deafening, so I moved slower, deliberate and ghost-like. I had walked these floors in the dark 1,000 times to soothe a crying baby or to fetch a glass of water after a nightmare. I knew which floorboard creaked in the hallway and which tile in the kitchen was slightly uneven. I moved not like a wife returning home, but like a predator entering new territory. Then I heard it. It was faint at first, drifting down the long corridor that led to the sunken living room. Jazz. Not just any jazz, but the slow, smoky saxophone of John Coltrane. It was a specific playlist, one titled Velvet Night, in our shared cloud account. It was the playlist Declan played on our second date, the one he played on our anniversaries, and the one he played when he wanted to initiate intimacy. My heart did not speed up. It slowed down. It was a physiological reaction I had honed in boardrooms when hostile takeovers were announced. The world sharpened. My hearing expanded. The scent of the house hit me, not the usual smell of lemon polish and stale coffee, but something sweeter, heavier, the scent of tuberose and expensive musk. I reached the end of the corridor. The double doors to the living room were slightly ajar, leaving a gap of perhaps 3 inches. A vertical slice of my life was waiting for me to view it. I did not push the door open. I did not call out his name. I stood in the shadows, a part of the architecture, and I looked. The lighting was dim, programmed to cast long, flattering shadows. The fireplace was lit, the flames dancing in rhythm with the saxophone, and there, in the center of the room, illuminated by the firelight and the soft glow of the recessed LEDs, was a performance. Serena, my best friend of 20 years, the woman who had held my hand when my father died, the woman who was the first to hold Lucas in the delivery room. She was dancing. She was spinning slowly, her arms raised above her head, her body moving with a fluid, practiced sensuality that I had never seen her display in our yoga classes. She was completely naked. Her skin glowed in the ambient light, smooth and pale. She looked like a statue come to life, a marble figure carved for the sole purpose of temptation. In her right hand, she held a crystal wineglass. My crystal wineglass, the Waterford set I had inherited from my grandmother. The dark red liquid swirled dangerously close to the rim as she pirouetted. It was the 1982 vintage Bordeaux I had bought at a charity auction, a bottle I had been saving for our 10th anniversary. She was drinking my future to celebrate her present. I shifted my gaze, following the line of her vision. Declan was sitting on the Italian leather sofa, his legs spread wide, his posture relaxed and commanding. He did not look like the stressed, underappreciated architect who constantly complained about his client's lack of vision. He looked like a king. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway, his tie discarded on the floor like a dead snake. He was watching her with an expression I recognized. It was the look he used to give me. Years ago, before the mortgage and the career and the child, it was a look of pure, unadulterated hunger. But there was something else in his eyes, something that chilled me more than the lust. It was triumph. He looked like a man who had gotten away with the perfect crime. I watched as Serena dipped low, laughing, a sound that tinkled like broken glass. "Do you think she is landing now?" Serena asked, her voice breathless and mocking. She took a sip of the wine, leaving a red stain on her lips. Declan swirled his own glass, chuckling. "Imogen, please, she is probably still in the first-class lounge in Heathrow, reading financial reports. She texted me that the merger was complex. She loves that word. It makes her feel important." "She is so boring." "Declan," Serena sighed, stepping closer to him. "I do not know how you stand it, all that talk about synergy and quarterly projections. Does she ever just let go?" "Never," Declan said, and the disdain in his voice was a physical blow to my chest. "She is a robot, Serena, a cash-dispensing robot, but you are the muse." I stood there, and I felt the blood drain from my face, pooling somewhere in my feet. A normal woman would have kicked the door open. A normal woman would have screamed, thrown a vase, scratched eyes out. I felt the urge, a hot, red wave rising in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I forced it into the pit of my stomach where it froze instantly. Screaming would give them the power. Screaming would make me the hysterical wife, the crazy woman. Screaming would warn them, slowly, with a hand that did not tremble. I reached into my pocket and withdrew my phone. I unlocked it, keeping the brightness down, and switched the camera to video mode. I selected the highest setting, 4,000 pixels per inch, 60 frames per second, high fidelity, evidence required clarity. I lifted the phone to the crack in the door. The lens focused instantly. I recorded Serena swaying her hips. I recorded the way Declan reached out and ran his hand down her thigh. I recorded the empty bottle of wine on the coffee table. I recorded the way they looked at each other, a look of conspiracy, of shared secrets. And then, the lens caught something that made my breath hitch in my throat. Serena turned, the firelight catching the hollow of her throat, resting there, glittering with a brilliance that mocked the dim room. Was a diamond necklace. It was a solitaire pendant, simple and elegant. I knew that diamond. I knew the cut, the clarity, the carat weight. I had picked it out myself from a catalog Declan had accidentally left open on his laptop 3 months ago. It was supposed to be my anniversary gift. When the date came and went with only a bouquet of supermarket flowers, Declan had told me the shipping company had lost the package. He had feigned anger, spent hours on the phone with customer service, and promised he would get the insurance money back. He had not lost it. He had given it to her. Serena was wearing my marriage around her neck while she danced on the grave of our friendship. The realization hit me with the force of a physical impact. This was not a drunken mistake. This was not a one-night stand born of loneliness. This was sustained. This was calculated. They were mocking me. They were spending my money, drinking my wine, and laughing at my stupidity. I recorded for exactly 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I captured their faces clearly. I captured the audio of them toasting to freedom. I captured the soul of their betrayal. Then, I stopped the recording. I lowered the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. My movements were mechanical. I stepped back from the door, placing my feet carefully on the center of the rug to avoid the hardwood floor. I retreated down the hallway, the sound of the jazz fading behind me like a dying radio signal. I reached the mudroom. I typed the code back into the alarm panel to reset the delay, ensuring it would not beep when I opened the door. I slipped out into the garage. I got back into the driver's seat of my car. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat in the dark, the silence of the car wrapping around me like a cocoon. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were wide, dry, and terrifyingly clear. There were no tears. I checked my pulse on my wrist. It was steady, 72 beats per minute. I backed the car out of the garage, letting the car roll down the driveway in neutral until I was far enough away to engage the engine without them hearing the hum. I drove 2 miles down the road to a secluded public beach parking lot that overlooked the dark water of the bay. I put the car in park and turned off the ignition. The only light came from the dashboard and the distant stars. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the last 10 years. I thought about the sacrifices. I thought about the nights I worked late to pay for the renovations Declan wanted. I thought about the times I comforted Serena when she cried about being single, telling her that she just hadn't found a man who appreciated her yet. I had been the architect of my own destruction, funding the very people who were now tearing me down, but they had made a fatal error. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for ignorance. They thought they were dealing with Imogen the wife, the woman who wanted everyone to be happy. They did not know they were now dealing with Imogen Brightwell, the director of strategy. I took a deep breath. Inhaling the cold air from the vents, I could feel the shift happening in my brain. It was a physical sensation, like gears grinding and locking into a new position. The emotional centers were being walled off, quarantined behind thick layers of logic and pragmatism. I was not a wife anymore. I was a crisis manager, and this was a hostile takeover. I looked at the phone in my hand. The video file was there, a 3-minute bomb waiting to be detonated, but not yet. Explosion without containment causes collateral damage. I needed a plan. I needed leverage. I needed to destroy them so thoroughly that they would not just lose this game. They would never be allowed to play again. "Okay," I whispered to the empty car. My voice sounded strange, rough like sandpaper. "Okay." I opened my contacts and created a new folder in my encrypted cloud drive. I named it simply The Project. I moved the video file into it. Then I pulled down the sun visor and looked at myself one last time. "You are not a victim," I told the woman in the mirror. "You are the director, and it is time to write the script." I put the car in drive. I had 48 hours of business trip left. I had a lot of work to do. The foyer was exactly as I had left it 48 hours prior, yet the air felt different. It was stale, recycled, heavy with the invisible particulate matter of deceit. I punched in the security code, ensuring my fingers trembled just slightly, a calculated affectation of fatigue. I was not Imogen the Avenger today. I was Imogen the weary wife, the breadwinner returning to her sanctuary, desperate for comfort. "Declan," I called out, pitching my voice to carry that specific frequency of needy affection I knew he found irritating but manageable. He emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing a cashmere sweater I had bought him for Christmas, the soft gray wool doing an excellent job of softening the edges of a man who was rotting from the inside out. He smiled. It was a good smile. It was the smile that had convinced me to marry him, the smile that had charmed investors, the smile that was currently hiding a set of teeth that had been gnawing on my life. "You are back," he exclaimed, closing the distance between us. "I thought your flight was landing later." "Tailwinds," I lied, dropping my bag with a heavy thud. "And I just wanted to be home." He pulled me into a hug. His body felt familiar, solid, warm. It was a terrifying dissonance. My skin remembered him as safety, but my brain now registered him as a pathogen. I forced my arms to wrap around his waist. I pressed my cheek against his chest. I could hear his heart beating. It was a steady, rhythmic thump, completely unbothered by conscience. Then came the kiss. He leaned down, pressing his lips to mine with a performative intensity. It was wet, lingering, and tasted faintly of mint and the expensive espresso beans we kept in the pantry. A week ago, I would have melted into this. Now, I felt a wave of nausea roll through my gut, acidic and violent. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil, not to wipe my mouth, not to spit in his face. Instead, I hummed a soft sound of contentment, playing the part of the grateful spouse. "God, I missed you," I whispered, pulling back just enough to look him in the eyes. I searched his pupils for guilt. I found none, only a slight dilation that suggested he was calculating how my early arrival impacted his schedule. "Is Lucas still at Mom's?" "Yeah," Declan said, smoothing my hair. "I figured you would be exhausted, so I told her we would pick him up tomorrow morning. Just us tonight. Just us." The words sounded like a threat. "Perfect," I said, offering him a tired smile. "I am going to freshen up. Then maybe we can order in." "Actually," Declan said, and there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Nervousness, excitement. "Serena is stopping by. She wanted to drop off a late birthday gift for Lucas. She said she would not stay long." I paused, letting the silence stretch for exactly 2 seconds. "Oh, that is sweet of her." It was bold. It was breathtakingly audacious. To bring her into my house, hours after I returned, to parade her in front of me while the scent of their affair likely still lingered on the upholstery. Serena arrived 20 minutes later. She swept in with a gust of wind and the clatter of high heels, carrying a brightly wrapped box in an air of chaotic energy that she curated as carefully as a museum exhibit. She was wearing a silk blouse that was unbuttoned 1 notch lower than professional standards dictated. "Imogen!" she shrieked, lunging at me. She smelled of tuberose, the same scent that had assaulted me in the hallway 2 nights ago. Her embrace was suffocating. She squeezed me tight, rocking me back and forth. It was the hug of a sister, the hug of a confidant. It was the hug of a woman who was actively sleeping with my husband. "I missed you so much," she cooed, pulling back and holding me by the shoulders. Her eyes were wide, sparkling with counterfeit warmth. "London, tell me everything. Did you buy out the Queen?" "Close?" I said, stepping out of her grasp under the pretense of guiding them to the living room. "Just a few tech conglomerates." I sat on the armchair, leaving the sofa free, as if drawn by a magnetic field. Serena sat on one end of the sofa, and Declan sat on the other. They left a cushion between them, a respectful distance for the audience of one, but I was not watching the space between them. I was watching the air. I offered to make tea. When I returned with the tray, I moved with the precision of a hawk circling a field. I set the tray down. "Earl Grey for you, Serena," I said, "and black coffee for Declan." As I passed Serena her cup, I watched her hand extend. Her pinky finger was slightly elevated. As she took the saucer, her eyes flicked to Declan. It was a micro-movement, taking less than a fraction of a second. It was a check-in, a silent communication. Is she suspicious? Are we safe? Declan reached for the sugar bowl at the exact moment Serena reached for a napkin. Their hands brushed. It looked clumsy, accidental. A stranger would have seen nothing. But I saw the way Serena's index finger lingered on the back of Declan's hand for a beat too long. I saw the way Declan's thumb twitched in response. It was an electric circuit closing. It was intimate. It was disgusting. "So," Serena said, blowing on her tea, her eyes fixed on me over the rim of the cup. "How is work still saving the world, one acquisition at a time?" "It is exhausting," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. "But necessary. Actually, the trip was quite dramatic, not because of the deal, but because of the personnel issues." I saw Declan stiffen slightly. "Personnel issues?" "Yes," I said, inventing the lie on the spot, weaving it with threads of reality to make it durable. "We had to fire the VP of Operations in the London office, just this morning." "Why?" Serena asked. She loved gossip. She leaned in, eager for the misfortune of others. "He was embezzling," I said calmly. But that was not the worst part. He was having an affair with his wife's sister. He thought he was a genius, hiding assets, using encrypted chats. He thought his wife was just a trophy who did not know how to read a balance sheet. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched them. I watched the way Serena's teacup froze halfway to her mouth. I watched the way Declan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed dryly. "That is terrible," Declan managed to say, his voice sounding thin. "Is it?" I asked, looking directly at him. "I think it is pathetic. The arrogance of it. He risked his entire career, his family, his reputation. For what a thrill. And the funniest part is, his wife knew for 6 months. She just waited until he transferred the bonus money into the joint account before she served him the papers. She destroyed him. He is unhireable now." Serena laughed. But it was a brittle, sharp sound. "Well, that sounds a bit vindictive. Does it not? I mean, people make mistakes." "Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk." "Serena," I said, my voice pleasant but the steel showing underneath. "Systematic deception is not a mistake. It is a campaign, and treason is punishable by execution. Is it not, metaphorically speaking?" "Of course." Serena placed her cup down. Her hand was shaking, just a tremor, but I saw it. "I should probably get going," she said abruptly, standing up. "I have a client meeting early tomorrow, a penthouse renovation in the city." "Of course," I said, standing up with her. "Thank you for the gift. Lucas will love it." I walked her to the door. Declan stayed seated, perhaps afraid his legs would not support him. As Serena hugged me goodbye, her body was rigid. "We must do lunch soon," she said, the words rushing out. "Oh, absolutely," I replied. "I have so much free time coming up. We will have plenty to talk about." That night, the house was quiet. We lay in our king-sized bed, the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets feeling like a shroud. Declan was facing away from me, his breathing shallow. He was not asleep. He was thinking about the VP in London. He was wondering if I was capable of that kind of cruelty. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling where the shadows from the oak tree outside danced like distorted figures. I turned my head slightly to look at the back of Declan's neck. I used to kiss that spot. I used to bury my face there and breathe him in. Now, I simply catalogued the vulnerability of it. My mind began to rewind the tape of the last 2 years. The red flags had been there, waving frantically in the periphery of my vision, but I had been too focused on the horizon to notice the ground crumbling beneath my feet. I remembered the ski trip to Aspen last winter. Serena had coincidentally been booked at the same resort with a group of friends who never seemed to materialize. I remembered how Declan had insisted on giving her private lessons because she was struggling on the blue runs. I had sat in the lodge, drinking hot chocolate, happy that my 2 favorite people were getting along. I remembered the lingerie, 3 months ago. Serena had asked for my opinion on a black lace bodysuit. "It is for a new date," she had said. I had told her it was bold, maybe a bit too aggressive. Last week, while doing laundry, I had found a black lace strap tangled in Declan's gym shorts. I had assumed it was mine, an old piece I had forgotten. It was not mine. It was hers. They had not just betrayed me, they had invaded every corner of my life. They had turned my existence into a shared joke. I waited until the rhythm of Declan's breathing changed to the deep, slow cadence of true sleep. It took an hour. He was restless. I slipped out of bed, moving with the silence of a ghost. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet and pulled a small tablet from my vanity drawer. I was not just a strategist. I was a coder by training. My father had been a cryptographer. Paranoia and pattern recognition were my inheritance. Before I had left for London, I had installed a kernel-level keylogger on all devices connected to our home network. It was a security measure I told myself was for protecting our financial data. In reality, it was intuition arming itself. I opened the dashboard. The log from Declan's phone populated the screen. I bypassed the standard texts. I went straight to the system logs, looking for app usage. There it was, a secure messaging app called Vault. It required a fingerprint to open, but the keylogger captured what was typed before encryption happened. I scrolled back to the timestamp of 2 days ago. Declan, she is gone. The house is ours. Serena. Finally, I hate how she decorates. That ambient lighting is so cold. We need to warm it up. Declan, we will change everything once the settlement is done. Did you see the stock price today? If she exercises her options next month, the portfolio goes up by $2 million. Serena good. That is the budget for the summer house in the Hamptons. I do not want the lake house. It smells like her expensive perfume. I read on, my stomach turning to stone. They had a name for their plan. Project Freedom. I found a thread from yesterday. While I was flying home, Declan. She is texting me hearts. It is pathetic. She has no idea she is sleeping next to a corpse. Serena, be nice to the cash cow. Darling, we need her to sign the trust transfer for Lucas before you drop the bomb. Play the role. Declan, I am. But God, she is so dull. It is like being married to a spreadsheet. I put the tablet down on the cold marble floor. I did not cry. Crying was a biological response to pain, and I was beyond pain. I was in a state of absolute clarity, a spreadsheet. They thought I was a spreadsheet, boring, predictable, calculated. They were right about the calculation. They were wrong about the prediction. I stood up and looked at myself in the large vanity mirror. My reflection was pale. My eyes dark circles of fatigue. I looked like a woman who was losing. I leaned closer to the glass, until my breath fogged the surface. I wiped it away with a sharp swipe of my hand. You are not the victim here. Imogen, I whispered to the reflection. The voice that came out did not sound like the wife who had hugged Declan in the kitchen. It sounded like the woman who fired incompetent executives without blinking. They want a villain. They want a cold, heartless spreadsheet. I straightened my spine. Fine, I will show them what happens when the numbers do not add up. No one is going to pity you. When this is over, they are going to be terrified of you. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back into the bedroom. I climbed into bed next to the man who planned to steal my fortune and my child. I pulled the duvet up to my chin. I slept soundly. I needed the rest. I had a war to finance in the morning. I called my assistant at 7 a.m. on Monday. I told her that the merger had depleted my reserves, that my doctor had flagged an irregularity in my cortisol levels, and that I was taking 3 days of immediate medical leave in the corporate world. Medical leave is a code that shuts down all inquiries. No one asks questions for fear of a lawsuit. I was officially off the grid. I was not sick. I was conducting an audit. The first step was securing external surveillance. I did not turn to the yellow pages or a quick internet search. I contacted a former head of security at Novus Orion, a man who now ran a boutique risk assessment firm for high-net-worth individuals. I needed a ghost, not a gumshoe. I hired a private investigator named Vance. Vance charged $400 an hour, plus expenses, and required a $5,000 retainer up front. I wired the money from an account Declan did not know existed. I need a complete timeline, I told Vance over an encrypted voice line. Where they go, who they meet, what they eat. I need photos. I need license plates. And I need it in real time. Consider it done, Vance replied. He did not ask why. Men like Vance knew that the why was always the same: someone was lying. With the physical world covered, I turned my attention to the digital realm. This was my battlefield. This was where I was a grandmaster and Declan was a child playing with matches. Declan was an architect. He understood load-bearing walls and tensile strength, but he treated digital security with a cavalier arrogance that bordered on negligence. We shared a robust home network, a server I had built to manage our smart home, our media library, and our personal cloud storage. Because I handled the maintenance, Declan assumed it was a magic box that simply worked. He often left his sessions active, relying on the Remember Me function because he found typing passwords to be too tedious. I sat in my home office, the blinds drawn tight against the morning sun. I logged into the server as an administrator. I bypassed his user interface and went straight to the root directory of his backup files. It was all there. He had not just been careless. He had been hoarding. I found a folder nested deep within his design inspiration directory. It was labeled simply Site Visits. A casual observer would assume it contained photos of construction sites or raw materials. I opened it. The thumbnails populated the screen, row after row of high-resolution images. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp intake of air that felt like swallowing glass. These were not construction sites. These were crime scenes of my marriage. There were thousands of files, photos, videos, screen recordings. I clicked on a video file dated 6 months ago. It opened. The setting was unmistakable. It was my kitchen, the granite island where I made Lucas's pancakes every Sunday morning. Serena was there, wearing nothing but a silk apron, my silk apron. She was laughing, feeding Declan a strawberry. The audio was crisp. "Does she know you are this hungry?" Serena asked in the video, her voice dripping with a playfulness that made my skin crawl. "She does not know anything," Declan's voice replied, distorted by his mouth being full. "She thinks I am at the gym." I watched another video. This one was in my bedroom, in my bed, the bed I had slept in last night. They were rolling around on my sheets, knocking over the stack of books on my nightstand. They were mocking the title of the book I was reading, a biography of a famous female CEO. "Look at this," Declan sneered, tossing the book to the floor. "She thinks she is going to rule the world." "Let her work," Serena giggled. "Someone has to pay for the champagne." I forced myself to watch. I forced myself to witness every pixel of their depravity. I needed to desensitize myself. I needed to burn the image of them into my retinas so that I would never, ever feel a moment of weakness or nostalgia for this marriage again. But as I dug deeper, the nausea transformed into something colder, something more analytical. I began to notice a pattern in the photos that was even more disturbing than the infidelity itself. I opened a subfolder labeled Serena, New Look. It contained photos of Serena trying on clothes, but they were not her style. Serena had always been bohemian, favoring flowy skirts and excessive jewelry. In these photos, she was wearing tailored power suits, sharp blazers, minimalist jewelry. She was wearing my clothes. I cross-referenced the dates. On the 12th of October, I had bought a specific bottle of niche perfume, a scent based on sandalwood and cedar. On the 15th of October, there was a receipt in Declan's digital wallet for the same perfume, delivered to Serena's apartment. I found a video of her at the gym. She was working with a trainer. I recognized the trainer. It was Marcus, the elite performance coach I'd been seeing for 3 years. She had hired him 2 months ago. "I want to build lean muscle," she told the camera, flexing her arm. "I want to look authoritative, like a boss." My blood ran cold. This was not just an affair. This was identity theft. Serena did not just want my husband. She wanted my life. She was systematically copying my aesthetic, my scent, my routine. She was single white femaling me. She was trying to become Imogen Brightwell. But without the 80-hour work weeks and the intellect required to maintain the position, I closed the media folder. My hands were shaking. Not from sorrow, but from a surplus of adrenaline. I needed to find the endgame. Affairs usually have a trajectory. They either burn out or they blow up. I ran a search query on the drive for documents containing the words divorce, custody, or assets. The system churned for a moment. The progress bar spinning, then it pinged. A hidden folder appeared. It was password protected. The name of the folder was Plan B. I cracked the password in under 2 minutes. It was Serena 1992. His laziness was almost insulting. I opened the folder. Inside were 5 PDF documents and a spreadsheet. I opened the first document. It was a draft of a divorce filing, but it was not a standard filing. It was a scorched earth petition. I read the clauses, my eyes scanning the legalese with the speed of a machine. They were not asking for a 50-50 split. They were alleging that I was mentally unstable. There was a section titled Custody Strategy. Argue that the mother is a workaholic with narcissistic tendencies. The notes read, cite her travel schedule. Cite the fact that the child spends 70% of his time with the maternal grandmother or nannies. Request full physical custody for the father, with supervised visitation for the mother until a psychiatric evaluation is completed. I stopped reading. The room went silent. The hum of the computer fan seemed to vanish. They were coming for Lucas. They were going to use my career, the career I built to provide a future for our son, the career that paid for the roof over their heads, as a weapon to take him away from me. They wanted to paint me as a monster who chose boardrooms over bedtime stories. I opened the spreadsheet. It was a financial projection. Alimony calculation, $18,000 per month. Child support, $6,000 per month. Liquidation of stock options, $4 million. Projected lifestyle budget for Declan and Serena, $25,000 per month. There was a column for wedding expenses. They had a venue picked out. It was a vineyard in Tuscany. They planned to book it for next September. I looked at the date on the file creation. 18 months ago. This was not a slip-up. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a conspiracy. For 18 months, while I was working to secure our future. They had been plotting to steal it. Every time Declan had kissed me goodbye before a business trip, he was likely counting the days until he could serve me with papers. Every time Serena had hugged me and told me I was a supermom, she was mentally gathering evidence to prove I was unfit. The betrayal was total. It was structural. It was a rot that had infected the foundation of my entire existence. I sat back in my chair. The sadness that had been lingering at the edge of my mind evaporated completely. It was replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a diamond cutting glass. Okay, I said aloud to the empty room. You want a war, I will give you an apocalypse. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out 3 external hard drives. These were military-grade encrypted drives, waterproof and shockproof. I began the transfer. I copied everything, the sex tapes, the photos, the receipts, the divorce drafts, the custody strategy, the mocking text messages. While the progress bars crawled across the screen, I picked up my secure phone. I dialed a number that was not in my contacts list. Evelyn Sterling, a voice answered on the second ring. Evelyn was the most feared divorce attorney in New York City. She was a shark who ate other sharks for breakfast. We had met at a Women in Leadership conference 2 years ago, and I had kept her card, hoping I would never need it. Evelyn, this is Imogen Brightwell, I said. I have a situation. Imogen, she said, her tone shifting instantly from professional to alert. Tell me. I am sending you a courier with an encrypted hard drive, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. It contains evidence of 18 months of infidelity, embezzlement of marital funds, and a conspiracy to commit fraud regarding custody arrangements. I need you to prepare a filing, but I do not want to serve them yet. Why not? Evelyn asked. Because I want to secure the assets first, I said, and I want to control the narrative. They have a plan to destroy my reputation. I need to nuke theirs first. Understood, Evelyn said. I could hear the smile in her voice. Send the drive. I will have the paperwork drafted by tomorrow morning. Do you want a restraining order? Not yet, I replied. I need them to feel safe. I need them to think they are winning. Be careful, Imogen, Evelyn warned. Living with the enemy is dangerous. I am not living with the enemy, Evelyn, I said, watching the transfer complete. I am living with 2 targets. I ejected the drives. I placed one in my office safe. I placed the second one in a hollowed-out book on my bookshelf, a copy of The Art of War. The third one I sealed in a padded envelope addressed to Evelyn Sterling. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the manicured lawn, the pool where Declan and Serena had likely swum naked while I was closing deals in London or Tokyo. The pain was gone. The shock was gone. What remained was a cold, hard resolve. They had made it about money and reputation. They had reduced our marriage to a transaction and my motherhood to a liability. Fine. If they wanted to play by the rules of capitalism, I would show them what a hostile takeover really looked like. I would not just divorce Declan. I would bankrupt him. I would not just end my friendship with Serena. I would make her name synonymous with treachery in every social circle she desperately aspired to join. I checked my watch. It was noon. I had been in the office for 5 hours. I needed to eat. I needed to sustain my energy. I walked to the kitchen. I made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up at the island, staring at the spot where Serena had sat in the video. I imagined them in the courtroom. I imagined the look on Declan's face when the judge read the transcripts of his Plan B. I imagined Serena's face when she realized that the lifestyle she had been auditioning for was being repossessed. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like ash, but I swallowed it anyway. I had the data, I had the timeline, I had the motive. Now, I just needed to follow the money. Money has a peculiar way of speaking, provided you know the language. It does not whisper or shout. It simply leaves footprints. For the past decade, I had been the primary hunter in our household, dragging home the kill in the form of bonuses, stock options, and base salary. While Declan played the role of the domestic gamekeeper, I had allowed him to manage our day-to-day investments, a decision born of a desire to make him feel essential to the household economy. I had thought it was an act of empowerment. I now realized it was an act of negligence. I sat in my home office, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. On my 3 monitors, I had pulled up every single financial stream associated with the Brightwell name. I was not looking at these numbers as a wife balancing a checkbook. I was looking at them as a forensic accountant dissecting a corpse to find the cause of death. Declan was an architect of physical spaces, but he was a clumsy architect of fraud. He assumed that because I was busy with macro strategy at Novus Orion, I would not notice the micro movements of our liquidity. He relied on the volume of our cash flow to hide his theft, like a man stealing cups of water from a rushing river, thinking the current would mask the loss. I started with the joint investment portfolio. On the surface, the balance sheets looked healthy. The market had been kind to us. But when I drilled down into the transaction history, I noticed a series of recurring withdrawals labeled as capital calls for a private equity venture labeled Horizon Development. I had vague memories of Declan mentioning this. He had pitched it to me 2 years ago as a cutting-edge real estate opportunity, something about virtual land acquisition and pre-development zoning in up-and-coming digital markets. I had nodded, signed the authorization forms, and gone back to reading a merger proposal. I had trusted him. I clicked on the transaction details. The money was leaving our account, traveling through a domestic clearinghouse, and landing in an LLC. I pulled up the corporate registry for Horizon Development. It was a shell, a classic, lazily constructed shell company registered in Delaware. I followed the money further. I cross-referenced the withdrawals with our primary savings. Then I saw it. The first true stab of financial betrayal that hurt worse than the infidelity. Our retirement accounts were intact, but Lucas's college fund, a 529 plan. I had started the week he was born, was bleeding. There were withdrawals made under the guise of administrative rebalancing and portfolio diversifications. I did the math in my head, then verified it on the calculator. Over the last 18 months, Declan had siphoned off $350,000. $350,000. That was not just pocket money. That was 4 years of Ivy League tuition. That was the security I had promised my son. Declan had not just stolen from me, he had stolen from his own child. He had cannibalized his son's future to fund his own fantasy. But where did it go? Money does not vanish. It transforms. I used a private database tool I had access to through work, a system we use to vet potential partners for liquidity issues. I ran a trace on the tax identification number associated with the receiving account of the shell company. The company, Aurora Holdings, was not owned by Declan. It was registered to a man named Thomas Miller. The name sounded familiar. I closed my eyes, accessing the mental Rolodex of Serena's endless anecdotes about her family. Thomas Miller, Tommy, her second cousin on her mother's side, the one who worked in commercial real estate in Jersey City and owed Serena a favor for bailing him out of a DUI charge 5 years ago. So, Serena was using her family as mules. I looked at the asset acquisitions for Aurora Holdings. There was only one significant purchase made in the last year, a down payment. It was for a penthouse apartment in Tribeca. I pulled up the listing. It was a 3-bedroom, floor-through loft with a private terrace and a view of the Hudson River. The price tag was $4.5 million. The down payment was exactly $350,000. I stared at the photos of the apartment on the real estate website. It was stunning. It was modern. It was everything Serena pretended to be. They were building a nest. They were using my money, the money I earned through sleepless nights and missed birthdays, to buy the home where they planned to live happily ever after once they had discarded me. My hands were cold. I rubbed them together, feeling the friction but no warmth. "Okay," I said softly. "You want to play house? Let us see if you can pay the mortgage." I picked up my phone and dialed the private client services line of our bank. I did not get a machine. I got a human being named Arthur who knew my voice. "Mrs. Brightwell," Arthur said, his tone warm and deferential. "How can I help you today?" "Arthur," I said, keeping my voice level, "I have reason to believe that our security may have been compromised. I am seeing some irregularities on the secondary accounts." "Oh, no," Arthur said, the professional alarm bells ringing instantly. "Shall we freeze everything?" "Not everything," I said. "I do not want to alert the potential hackers just yet. I want to lower the daily transaction limits on the joint credit cards and the supplementary cards held by Declan. Set the limit to $50. Tell him it is a system-wide flag for fraud protection if he calls. Tell him it will take 48 hours to clear." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said. "I want a full audit of the credit card statements for the last 6 months. Specifically, look for high-value purchases categorized under jewelry or luxury goods." "I can pull that up right now," Arthur said. The keyboard clacked in the background. "Let me see. There is one significant charge from 3 weeks ago on the platinum card ending in 4588. "Go on," I said. "A charge at Cartier," Arthur said. $12,500. Item description, a solitaire engagement ring. The heir left the room. He had bought her an engagement ring. He had bought his mistress an engagement ring using his wife's credit card. The level of disrespect was so profound, it was almost impressive. He was so confident in my blindness, so assured of my passivity, that he did not even bother to hide the purchase. He probably told himself he would pay it back with the dividend from the fake real estate investment before the bill came due, or perhaps he simply did not care. Perhaps he thought I owed him this happiness. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. "Please email me that receipt immediately. And Arthur, let us keep this conversation between us for now. I am conducting my own internal investigation." "Of course, Imogen," Arthur said. "We value your discretion." I hung up. I sat there for a moment, letting the rage crystallize. It was no longer a fire. It was a glacier, massive and crushing. I needed to move. The walls of the house were starting to feel like they were closing in. I needed to breathe air that didn't taste of betrayal. I grabbed my coat and drove into town. I had a meeting scheduled, not in a boardroom, but in the back corner of a small, dimly lit coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans and rain. Evelyn was already there. She looked like a weapon sheathed in silk. Her suit was sharp enough to cut skin, and her eyes were scanning a document on her tablet. I sat down opposite her. I did not order coffee. I placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. $350,000, I said without preamble. Evelyn looked up, raising an eyebrow. That is a significant number. That is what he stole from Lucas's college fund, I said. He moved it to a shell company owned by Serena's cousin. They used it as a down payment on a penthouse in Tribeca. Evelyn let out a low whistle. Well, that changes things. We are no longer looking at just a contested divorce. We are looking at criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud, specifically, since he used electronic transfers. I also found the receipt for the engagement ring, I added. He bought it on my credit card. Evelyn actually laughed. It was a short, dark bark of amusement. He is a special kind of stupid, isn't he? It is almost insulting to your intelligence. He thinks I am a checkbook, I said. He does not think I am a person. So, Evelyn said, leaning forward and tapping the folder, we have the leverage. We can file ex parte motions tomorrow. We can freeze his assets, seize the shell company's accounts, and have him served at his office. We can lock him out of the house by noon. No, I said. Evelyn paused. No. That is too clean, I said. If we serve him now, he goes into defense mode. He will lawyer up. He will try to hide the rest of the assets. He will spin a story about how I sanctioned these investments. It will be a long, drawn-out battle. What do you want to do? Evelyn asked. I want to catch them when they feel invincible, I said. I want to destroy them in front of an audience. I told her about the dinner party. I told her about the guest list. I told her about the invitation I had extended to Serena's parents, the pious and proud Ashfords. Evelyn listened, her expression shifting from professional detachment to grim admiration. She tapped her pen against her chin. It is theatrical, she admitted. But legally, it is risky. If you film them without consent in certain contexts, it could be inadmissible. I am not filming them for court, I said. I am filming them for the jury of public opinion. And as for the evidence, I am not going to present it to a judge first. I am going to present it to her parents, and to him. I want them to confess. I want the shock to break them. Evelyn nodded slowly. If you can get him to admit to the embezzlement in front of witnesses, especially witnesses who are not legally bound to silence, that is a confession, we can use that. I will get it, I promised. I know exactly which buttons to push. He is arrogant. When he is cornered, he does not apologize. He justifies. He will try to explain why he deserved that money. And the assets? Evelyn asked. File the papers on Monday morning, I said. The moment the banks open, I want the accounts frozen, the penthouse seized, and the restraining order active the second the weekend is over. But until then, let the credit limit stay low. Let him think it is a glitch. Evelyn reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was cool. Imogen, are you sure you can handle this, sitting through a dinner party with them, pouring wine for the woman who is wearing your husband's ring? I looked at Evelyn. I thought about the video of Serena dancing in my living room. I thought about the empty college fund. I thought about the look on Declan's face when he called me boring. I can handle it, I said. I have spent my entire career preparing for high-stakes negotiations. This is just another deal, and I never lose. All right, Evelyn said, pulling the folder toward her. I will have the criminal referrals ready. We will frame it as dissipation of marital assets with malicious intent. It will be a bloodbath. Good, I said, standing up. I do not want a settlement. Evelyn, I want a capitulation. I left the coffee shop and walked back to my car. The wind was picking up, blowing dead leaves across the pavement. I checked my phone. There was a text from Declan. My card got declined at the gas station. Weird. Can you check the bank? I typed back immediately. I called them. They said their system is undergoing maintenance this weekend. Should be fine by Monday. Use cash. So annoying. he replied. I know. I typed, hang in there. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had cracked in days. The trap was set. The evidence was gathered. The audience was invited. Now, all I had to do was set the table. The art of manipulation is not about forcing someone to do what you want. It is about making them believe that doing what you want was their brilliant idea all along. I needed Declan and Serena in the same room, trapped, with no exit strategy and an audience that would ensure their mutual destruction. I needed a stage for my final act. I chose a Tuesday evening to pitch the idea. Tuesday was Declan's ego night, the night he usually spent bragging about potential clients or complaining about how the world failed to understand his architectural genius. I had prepared a dinner of roast lamb, his favorite, and poured him a glass of the heavy, oaky Cabernet. He pretended to understand. You know, I said, swirling my own glass and looking at him through my lashes. I have been thinking a lot about us lately, about how lucky we are. Declan looked up from his plate, a piece of rosemary clinging to his lip. Lucky you have been working 18-hour days. Imogen, we have barely seen each other. That is exactly it, I sighed, infusing my voice with a heavy dose of regret. I feel terrible about it. I feel like I have been neglecting the most important things in my life. You, our home, and our friends. I paused, letting the silence stretch just enough to make him uncomfortable. And Serena, I added softly. Declan stiffened. It was subtle, just a tightening of the jaw. But I saw it. Serena, what about her? She has been such a rock for us, I said, lying with a fluidity that frightened me. With me being away so much, knowing she is around, it just makes me feel safe. She is Lucas's godmother. She is practically family. I feel like I have not properly thanked her for everything she does. Declan relaxed. He took a large gulp of wine. She cares a lot about us. She is a good friend. She is more than a friend, I said, leaning forward and placing my hand over his. His skin was warm. I resisted the urge to dig my fingernails into his flesh until I drew blood. She is the sister I never had, and that is why I want to throw a party. A party? Declan frowned. Imogen, you just got back. You are exhausted. Do we really need the hassle? Not a big party, I reassured him. An intimate dinner, just close family and friends, a celebration of loyalty and stability. Actually, I was thinking it would be a perfect opportunity for you to showcase the house. I saw the spark in his eyes. Vanity. It was his Achilles heel. Showcase it, he asked. Yes, I said. You know how you are always saying you want to attract more high-end residential clients? Well, if we host a truly elegant evening, hire a photographer, get some shots of people enjoying the space, it could be great for your portfolio, a lifestyle shoot, disguised as a dinner. The hook was set. He was not thinking about Serena anymore. He was thinking about his brand. He was thinking about how good he would look playing the lord of the manor. That is actually not a bad idea, he admitted, puffing out his chest slightly. The lighting in the dining room is perfect this time of year. Exactly, I smiled. But for it to be a real celebration of Serena, we need to make it special. I was thinking we should invite her parents. Declan dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. The Ashfords, he choked out. Imogen, are you insane? They are intense. Intense was a polite word for the Ashfords. Margaret and William Ashford were Boston Brahmins, a couple so steeped in old-world Catholic guilt and social rigidity that they made the Victorians look relaxed. They were wealthy, judgmental, and terrifying. They viewed Serena's career in interior design as a frivolous hobby and her single status at 34 as a moral failing. Declan was terrified of them, not just because they were intimidating, but because William Ashford was a retired federal judge with a nose for deceit. I know they are difficult, I said soothingly, but that is why we have to invite them. Serena is always complaining that they do not take her seriously. Imagine if they saw her here, being celebrated by us, in this beautiful home. Imagine if they saw how successful and loved she is. It would mean the world to her. I squeezed his hand. And honestly, Declan, having Judge Ashford in your network, that is a connection money cannot buy. I watched the greed war with the fear in his eyes. Greed won. It always did with him. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, if you think you can handle Margaret, then let us do it. But keep it small. Small and exquisite, I promised. Next Saturday, the second step was the bait. Serena called me the next morning at 10 o'clock. She sounded breathless, bordering on hysterical. Imogen, she said, skipping the pleasantries. Why did my mother just text me asking what the dress code is for dinner at your house? Oh, good, she told you, I exclaimed, pitching my voice to a level of cheerful oblivion. I wanted it to be a surprise, but I guess Margaret is too organized for that. A surprise? Serena's voice cracked. Imogen, what is going on? Why are you inviting my parents? You know I cannot stand being in a room with them for more than an hour. Serena, honey, breathe, I said, putting on my wireless headset so I could pace my office like a tiger in a cage. I felt so bad about how much you have been doing for me and Lucas. I wanted to do something nice. I know things are tense with your folks, but I thought if they saw you in a loving environment, surrounded by your chosen family, it might bridge the gap. I do not know, she stammered. It feels weird. Just us and them. And Declan, of course, I added. He is so excited. He wants to toast to our friendship. Come on, Serena, do not spoil it. It is my way of saying thank you. For everything. I let the double meaning hang in the air. Thank you for sleeping with my husband. Thank you for stealing my money. Okay, she said finally, her voice small. Okay, but no politics at the table. Promise me. I promise, I lied. It will be a night of total honesty. The final piece of the guest list was the most crucial. I needed the Ashfords to not just attend, but to arrive with expectations that would make the fall catastrophic. I called Margaret Ashford on her landline. She did not believe in cell phones. She considered them rude. Mrs. Ashford, I said, adopting the respectful, submissive tone of a well-bred daughter-in-law. It is Imogen Brightwell. Imogen, she clipped. Her voice sounded like dry leaves being crushed. To what do we owe the pleasure? Serena said something about a dinner. Yes, I said. I'm so glad you can make it. I know it is a trip from Boston, but well, I really thought you should be here. Why? She asked sharply. Is Serena in trouble? Has she lost that job of hers? No, quite the opposite. I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Mrs. Ashford, I cannot say too much because it is not my place, but Serena has been different lately, happier. She has been seeing someone very close to us, someone stable. Silence on the other end. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Are you implying she is settling down? Margaret asked. Finally. I think there might be an announcement soon, I said, crossing my fingers behind my back. I saw a ring receipt recently. A very impressive solitaire. It was the truth. I had seen a ring receipt. I just omitted the part about who paid for it and who the man was. I see, Margaret said, the ice in her voice thawed by a fraction of a degree. Well, William will be pleased. We have been worried she would end up a spinster with nothing but fabric swatches to keep her warm. We will be there. Imogen, 7 o'clock sharp. Perfect, I said. I look forward to it. I hung up and stared at the phone. I had just promised a conservative mother an engagement. When she realized the fiancé was my husband, the explosion would be nuclear. Now, I had to set the stage. I did not cook. Cooking was an act of love, and I had no love left to give these people. I hired a private chef service from the city, a high-end team that specialized in discreet dining for the elite. I paid them double their usual rate to sign a non-disclosure agreement that was stricter than the one I used for corporate mergers. I met with the head chef, a stern Frenchman named Luc, in my kitchen on Thursday. The menu must be a narrative. I told him, I want it to evoke memories. What kind of memories? Madame? Luke asked, pen poised over his notebook. Bittersweet ones, I said. We designed the courses together, for the appetizer. We chose raw oysters with a blood orange mignonette, slippery, cold, and slightly metallic. For the main course, I insisted on a specific dish. I want a spicy roast chicken, I said. Extremely spicy. I want the heat to build slowly, so you do not realize you are burning until it is too late. And the name on the printed menu? Luke asked. Call it poulet de trahison, I said. Luke paused. Chicken of betrayal. That is unusual. It is an inside joke, I said, my face completely deadpan. My husband loves dark humor. And for dessert, tart lemon meringue, I said. Something that leaves a sour taste in your mouth, masked by a lot of sugar on top. Very well, Luke said, closing his notebook. And the wine? I will handle the wine, I said. I have a bottle of 1982 Bordeaux that needs to be opened, or rather, the empty bottle needs to be displayed. I had one final instruction for the service staff. There will be a moment, I told the staffing manager, before the dessert is served, where I will stand up to give a toast. I want the lights dimmed. I want the projector screen in the dining room lowered. And most importantly, I want one of your servers, the one who is least noticeable, to stand in the corner and record the entire table on this phone. I handed him an old iPhone I had wiped clean. You want us to film the dinner? He asked, confused. My husband wants a candid record of our friends' reactions, I said. It is for his portfolio. He wants to capture the raw emotion of the evening. Understood, he said. By Friday afternoon, the house was ready. I had instructed the cleaners to polish every surface until it gleamed. I wanted the house to look like a museum, pristine, cold, and valuable. I walked into the dining room. The table was set for 6, the finest crystal, the heavy silver cutlery, the crisp white linen napkins. It looked like a setting for a diplomatic summit, or an execution. I picked up the place card for Declan. I ran my thumb over his name written in elegant calligraphy. I placed it at the head of the table. I placed Serena's card to his right. I placed the Ashfords across from them. And I placed my own card at the other end of the table. Far away, in the darkness. The trap was not just physical, it was psychological. They were walking into this thinking they were the guests of honor. Declan thought he was showing off his success. Serena thought she was gaining her parents' approval. The Ashfords thought they were witnessing a betrothal. They were all correct, in a twisted way. I looked at the blank projector screen that descended from the ceiling with a silent hum. Showtime, I whispered. I went upstairs to choose my dress. I bypassed the modest black cocktail dress I usually wore to these functions. Instead, I pulled out a garment I had bought in London on a whim. A dress I had never worn because I thought it was too aggressive. It was crimson red. It was structured, sharp, and fit like a second skin. It was not the dress of a wife. It was the dress of a prosecutor. I hung it on the door of the wardrobe. Tomorrow, the curtain would rise, and for the first time in 18 months, everyone was going to see the truth, whether they wanted to or not. Fear is a parasite. It does not kill its host immediately. It burrows in, feeds on confidence, and slowly paralyzes the nervous system. For the 3 days leading up to the dinner party, I decided to cultivate fear in my own home, nurturing it like a rare orchid. I wanted Declan and Serena to be ripe with anxiety before I even poured the first glass of wine. I wanted them jumping at shadows so that when the guillotine finally fell, they would almost welcome it as a release. On Wednesday morning, 3 days before the event, I began the psychological bombardment. I sat at the kitchen island, drinking my black coffee and sorting through the mail. Declan was across from me, scrolling through his tablet, pretending to read industry news while likely checking stock prices for the portfolio he planned to liquidate. I had prepared the prop the night before. I had taken a glossy brochure from a high-end divorce litigation firm, a competitor of Evelyn's, and slipped it into the pile of bills and magazines. It was bright yellow, with bold black text that read, "Is your spouse hiding assets? We find everything." I slid the stack of mail across the marble counter toward him. "Here is the mail," I said, my voice breezy and unconcerned. "Mostly junk, I think." Declan reached for his coffee with one hand and idly flipped through the envelopes with the other. I watched over the rim of my mug. He tossed aside a utility bill, then a catalog. Then his hand froze. He stared at the yellow brochure. For a split second, the color drained from his face, leaving his skin the shade of old parchment. His eyes darted up to meet mine. I was ready. I was smiling, buttering a piece of toast with the concentration of a surgeon. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. I looked up, feigning confusion. "What is what?" He held up the brochure. His fingers were gripping the paper so hard the corners were crinkling. "Oh, that," I laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "I saw that. It is so tacky. Is it not? They must be blanketing the whole zip code. I guess they assume everyone in this tax bracket is cheating on each other. Just throw it in the recycling." Declan stared at me for another second, searching for any sign of deception, but I was the picture of the oblivious wife. I took a bite of my toast, humming a little tune. "Right," he said, exhaling a breath he had been holding. "Just junk mail. Stupid." He crumpled the brochure into a ball and threw it into the trash can, but he did not go back to his tablet. He spent the rest of breakfast tapping his foot against the leg of the stool, a nervous tic he had not displayed since his licensing exams. "Point one to the house, on Thursday afternoon." Serena stopped by. She claimed she was there to measure the dining room windows for potential new drapes, a project I had never approved, but which gave her an excuse to be in the house while Declan was working from home. I walked in on them in the living room. They were standing a safe distance apart, but the air between them was charged with that sickening, conspiratorial intimacy. "Imogen," Serena chirped, her smile a little too bright. "I was just telling Declan that these velvet curtains are a bit heavy for the season." "They are perfectly fine," I said. Walking past her to place my briefcase on the desk, I stopped and turned, looking her up and down. She was wearing a sleeveless top and tight leggings. The results of her sessions with my trainer, Marcus, were undeniable. She looked sculpted. "You look incredible." "Serena," I said. My voice was low, admiring. She preened slightly. "Oh, thank you. Just trying to stay healthy." "No, really." I stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to make her flinch. "Your core looks so strong, and your posture, you are moving differently." I tilted my head, studying her like a specimen. "It reminds me of a dancer," I said. "Like you are rehearsing for a performance, a private show, perhaps for a very specific audience." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Serena's eyes widened. Her hand went to her throat, fingering the space where the diamond necklace usually rested. She was not wearing it today. She was smarter than Declan. "I have been doing some Zumba," she stammered, "at the community center." "Zumba," I repeated, letting the word roll around my mouth like a marble. "That must be it. Well, keep it up. Whatever you are doing, it is certainly catching people's attention." I winked at Declan. He forced a smile that looked like a grimace. Later that evening, the paranoia began to bear fruit. I was in the kitchen, prepping Lucas's dinner. When Declan walked in, he looked agitated. He was wearing his coat. "I need to run to the office," he said. "I forgot a file. I need to grab some cash from the safe for gas and incidentals." He walked over to the wall safe concealed behind a painting in the pantry. It was where we kept emergency cash and our passports. He punched in the code, 1985, his birth year. The keypad beeped. A red light flashed. Access denied. He frowned and typed it again. Beep. Red light. "Imogen," he called out, panic edging into his tone. "The safe is not opening." "Oh, I forgot to tell you," I said. chopping a carrot with rhythmic, loud strikes of the knife. I updated the home security firmware yesterday. The safe integration got corrupted. It completely locked down. Locked down? Declan spun around. When will it be fixed? I have a technician coming on Monday. I lied. Why do you need cash urgently? I have $20 in my purse. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. No, it is fine. I just hate when things do not work. He did not need cash for gas. He needed to check if his passport was still there. He was starting to think about exit strategies. He was starting to wonder if the walls were closing in. He was right. They were. On Friday morning, I executed the next phase of the isolation protocol. I woke Lucas up early. He was groggy, his hair sticking up in soft tufts. I hugged him tighter than usual, inhaling the scent of his baby shampoo. He was the only innocent thing in this entire wreckage, and I would burn the world down to keep the ash from touching him. Where are we going, Mommy? He asked as I buckled him into the car seat. You are going to Grandma's for the weekend, I said, smoothing his cheek. Daddy and I have a boring adult party with lots of talking. You will have way more fun with Grandma. She bought that new Lego set you wanted. The big spaceship. His eyes lit up. The biggest, I promised. I drove him to my mother's house in Westchester. My mother, a woman of few words and sharp intuition, looked at me as she took Lucas's hand. You look like you are going to war, Imogen, she said quietly. I am, Mom, I replied. Just keep him away from the phone until Sunday, please. She nodded. She did not ask questions. She simply pulled me into a hug that felt like armor. Returning to the empty house felt symbolic. I had evacuated the civilians. Now, the battlefield was clear. Friday afternoon brought the financial squeeze. I was in my office when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Declan. My card just got declined at the liquor store. Trying to buy the wine for tomorrow. Can you transfer funds? I smiled. The limit reduction I had requested from the bank was active. I typed back, that is weird. I got a notification from the bank about system maintenance this weekend. They said transactions over $50 might flag as errors until Monday. Just use the debit card for the small stuff. I will pick up the expensive wine. This is ridiculous, he replied. First the safe, now the bank. Everything is breaking. It is just a glitch. Honey. I sent back, relax. He did not relax. I pulled up the internal camera feed on my second monitor. I could see him in the kitchen. He was pacing. He was running his hands through his hair. He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and then hung up before it connected. He was likely trying to call Serena, but stopped himself, realizing that phone records were dangerous. He was learning, but he was learning too late. That evening, the cracks in their alliance began to show. I told Declan I had a conference call with Tokyo and locked myself in my office. In reality, I put on my noise-canceling headphones and opened the surveillance app. Declan and Serena were in the backyard, near the pool house. It was dusk, the light fading into a bruised purple. They thought they were safe outside, away from the glitching smart home. They did not know I had installed a long-range directional microphone and a high-definition camera in the birdhouse 3 months ago to monitor a family of cardinals. Now, I was monitoring 2 vultures. I turned up the volume. The audio was crisp, cutting through the wind. I do not like it. Declan, Serena was saying. She was hugging herself, shivering despite the mild weather. The invite to my parents, the comments about my dancing, the way she looks at me. She knows. She does not know, Declan hissed. He looked haggard. The stress of the last 3 days had aged him. If she knew, she would have screamed. She would have thrown you out. Imogen is not sophisticated enough to play games. She is a hammer, not a scalpel. You are wrong, Serena argued, her voice rising. She is acting strange. And the bank accounts. It feels like a trap. We should cancel. Tell her I'm sick. We cannot cancel, Declan snapped. He grabbed Serena's arm. If we cancel now, that looks suspicious. We have to play the part. We have to get through this dinner. Let her feel like the benevolent queen bee. And then next week, We file the papers. We stick to the plan. I am scared, Serena whispered. My father, if he finds out. He will not find out, Declan insisted. Imogen is obsessed with her reputation. She would never cause a scene in front of guests. She is too polite. She is too boring. I sat in my dark office, the blue light of the monitor illuminating my face. Boring. He really believed that. He believed my civility was a lack of spine. He believed my silence was stupidity. Oh, Declan, I whispered to the screen, you have no idea what a hammer can do when it is wielded with precision. I watched them part ways. Serena left through the garden gate, looking over her shoulder. Declan went back inside, pouring himself a drink the moment he entered the kitchen. I waited until midnight. Declan passed out in the guest room. He had claimed he had a headache and didn't want to disturb me. Perfect. I sat at my desk and opened the video editing software. I imported the file, the dance, MP4. I had watched it so many times I was numb to the vulgarity of it. Now, I was an editor. I was an artist. I trimmed the start. I adjusted the color grading, turning the warm, romantic lighting of the room into something harsh and cold. I isolated the audio track, boosting the levels of their laughter so it sounded distorted, almost demonic. I found the moment where Serena spun around, the diamond necklace catching the light. I slowed the footage down to 10% speed. The frame froze on the diamond. It glittered like a star. I superimposed a text overlay, just a date and a price tag. October 15th, $12,500. Then, I cut to the text messages. I had taken screenshots of their most vicious exchanges. I animated them to scroll over the video of them touching each other. She is so boring. We need her money. Just wait until the bonus clears. I set the whole montage to a piece of classical music, not the jazz they loved. I chose Lacrimosa from Mozart's Requiem. The mournful, apocalyptic choir provided a chilling counterpoint to the debauchery on screen. It was a masterpiece of evidence. It was a 3-minute horror movie. I rendered the file. I saved it to a USB drive. I held the small metal stick in my hand. It weighed less than an ounce, yet it contained enough explosive power to level 2 lives. I turned off the computer. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark garden. The fear I had planted was blooming beautifully. They were terrified, turning on each other, doubting their own reality. They were exhausted. I, on the other hand, had never felt more awake. Tomorrow night, the mouse would realize that the cat had not been sleeping. The cat had just been sharpening its claws. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate. It was the kind of gray, flat light that makes colors pop with unnatural intensity. A perfect lighting setup for the cinema verite horror film I was about to direct. The house was quiet, stripped of the chaotic energy of a 6-year-old and the domestic hum of a happy family. It was no longer a home, it was a facility. At 9 a.m, the audiovisual team arrived. I had hired a commercial crew, the same vendors Novus Orion used for product launches. They were efficient, silent, and expensive. I directed them to the dining room, where they mounted a 100-inch projection screen against the far wall. It was a monstrosity of high-definition technology, completely out of place amidst the wainscoting and the crystal chandelier. Declan wandered in around 10, holding a cup of coffee, looking at the installation with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "Is that not a bit excessive?" he asked, gesturing to the white canvas that now dominated the room. "I thought we were just having dinner." "It is a celebration." "Declan," I said, smoothing the tablecloth, "I want to show a retrospective. Photos of us and Serena from college, the early days of your firm, Lucas's birth. You know how sentimental the Ashfords are about legacy. If you want to impress the judge, you have to show him history." Declan nodded, his vanity instantly overriding his suspicion. "Right, legacy, good angle. Just make sure the resolution is high. I do not want my early architectural drafts looking pixelated." "Do not worry," I promised, my voice devoid of irony. The resolution will be crystal clear. Every detail will be visible. Once the crew left, I retreated to my study to assemble the ammunition. I had purchased 3 leather-bound portfolios, the kind usually reserved for closing multi-million-dollar contracts. They were heavy. Smelling of rich grain leather and finality, I opened the first portfolio. This was for Margaret and William Ashford. I placed the financial forensic report on top. It detailed the $350,000 transfer from Lucas's college fund to the shell company owned by their relative. I included the deed to the penthouse, highlighting Serena's name on the unauthorized occupancy agreement. But the pièce de résistance was the printout of a chat log where Serena mocked her mother's tacky pearls and her father's senile rambling. The Ashfords valued loyalty above all else. This would not just break their hearts, it would offend their gods. The second portfolio was for Declan. I did not fill it with emotional pleas. I filled it with law. It contained the draft of the divorce petition, listing 17 counts of marital misconduct. I included the forensic accounting of his embezzlement, categorized as grand larceny under state law. I added the printout of the engagement ring receipt he had charged to my card, stapled to a photo of him wearing it on his pinky finger in a drunken selfie he had sent to Serena. This portfolio was not a breakup letter, it was a prison sentence. The third portfolio was for Serena. It was thinner, but sharper. It contained side-by-side photos of us, me wearing an outfit in March, her wearing the exact copy in April, me cutting my hair in a bob in June, her doing the same in July. I included the psychological profile my investigator had commissioned, which labeled her behavior as pathological obsession with identity usurpation. And on the very top, I placed a high-resolution still from the video of her dancing naked in my living room, with a single sticky note attached that read, "The audition is over." I closed the portfolios. I stacked them neatly on the corner of my desk. They looked professional. They looked deadly. At 2 p.m, I went to the dining room to plant the listening devices. I had ordered a massive centerpiece from the florist, a sprawling arrangement of white hydrangeas, eucalyptus, and blood-red roses. It was beautiful and dense. I lifted the heavy vase and placed 3 high-fidelity voice recorders underneath the foliage, nestled in the wet floral foam. These were not cheap dictaphones. They were omnidirectional microphones used in corporate espionage. They would capture every gasp, every whisper, and every lie spoken at the table. I tested them. Testing, 1, 2, I am divorcing my husband. I played it back. The sound was crisp, picking up even the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. I smiled. In the state of New York, one-party consent was required for recording conversations. But in a private residence where criminal activity was being discussed, specifically the admission of fraud, the legal gray area was where I intended to park my tank. And regardless of admissibility, once the Ashfords heard the truth, the court of law would be secondary to the court of family ruin. At 4 p.m, I initiated the lockdown protocol. I opened my laptop and accessed the Smart Home Administrator dashboard. I created a new routine named The Trap. I programmed the electronic locks on the front and back doors to engage automatically at 7:30 in the evening, 30 minutes after the guests were scheduled to arrive. I disabled the manual override pads in the hallway. The only way to unlock the doors would be through my biometric fingerprint on the master tablet, which I would have with me at the table. I adjusted the thermostat. I lowered the temperature to 65 degrees. I wanted them cold. I wanted them uncomfortable. I wanted them to feel the chill before the ghost walked in. At 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn, my attorney. "Everything is filed." The text read, "The judge signed the emergency asset freeze order an hour ago. It goes into effect at 8 o'clock Monday morning. The process servers are on standby to hit Declan at his office and Serena at her studio simultaneously. You have the green light." I typed back, "Understood." Going dark now. I sat at my desk one last time. I pulled out a piece of stationery, my personal letterhead. I uncapped my fountain pen. My hand hovered over the paper. I needed to write this. I needed to anchor myself. The woman I was about to become for the next 4 hours was a monster. She had to be, but I needed to remember that the monster was a costume, not the skin. Dear Imogen, I wrote, "Today is January 23rd. You are about to destroy 2 lives. You are going to humiliate your husband and your best friend in front of their family. You are going to be cruel. You are going to be relentless. Do not apologize for this. Remember Lucas. Remember the empty college fund? Remember the text where they called you a boring cash cow? Remember the engagement ring on your credit card? Remember that while you were working yourself to exhaustion to build a life for them, they were plotting to dismantle you. You are not doing this out of spite. You are doing this for survival. You are surgically removing a tumor. It will be bloody, but it is necessary. When this night is over, you will pour a glass of wine. You will cry, and then you will rebuild. But tonight, you are not a wife. You are Nemesis. Signed, Imogen." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. I locked the drawer. At 6 o'clock, I went upstairs to dress. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was pink, washing away the residue of the understanding wife persona I had worn all week. I dried my hair straight, sharp as a blade. I walked to the wardrobe and pulled out the red dress. It was a crimson sheath, tailored to perfection. It had a high neck and long sleeves. Modest in cut but aggressive in color. It was the shade of fresh arterial blood. It was the shade of a warning sign. I stepped into it. The zipper hissed as I pulled it up, sealing me inside. I looked in the mirror. I applied my makeup. I did not do the soft, natural look Declan preferred. I did a sharp-winged eyeliner and a dark, matte red lip. I put on my diamond studs, the ones I had bought for myself when I got my first promotion. I looked like a CEO on the cover of Forbes. I looked like a woman who could fire 1,000 people without blinking. I went downstairs. Declan was already in the living room, pouring himself a scotch. He was wearing his tuxedo, looking every inch the charming architect, but his hand was shaking. The glass clinked against the decanter. He looked up as I entered. His eyes widened. He had never seen me in this dress. He had never seen me look this formidable. "Wow," he said, and for a second, the fear in his eyes was replaced by genuine awe. "You look intense. Imogen, that is a lot of red." "It is a celebration." "Declan," I said, walking to the bar and pouring myself a sparkling water. "Red is for passion, and for power." He swallowed hard. "Right, passion." He gestured toward the dining room, where the massive screen stood like a monolith. "So," he asked, trying to sound casual, "what is actually on that video? You said it was a journey of our friendship." I turned to him. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not blink. "It is a masterpiece. Declan," I said softly. "I spent nights editing it. It captures the absolute truth of who we are. It shows everything that Serena has contributed to this marriage. I think when you see it, you will finally understand how much I know about everything." The blood drained from his face. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, checking my watch, "that you should appreciate the effort I put into the details. I wanted tonight to be unforgettable." The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Declan jumped. He looked at the door, then back at me. He looked like a trapped animal sensing the predator in the grass. "That must be the Ashfords," I said, placing my glass down on a coaster with a deliberate click. "Showtime," I walked past him, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I did not touch him. I did not reassure him. I moved with the momentum of a freight train that had lost its brakes. I reached the front door. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool air of the foyer. I put on my smile, the one I used for shareholders when the earnings report was bad. But the strategy was sound. I opened the door. The night had officially begun. The fortress was sealed, the court was in session, and I was the judge, jury, and executioner. The doorbell chime echoed through the foyer. Precise and demanding. It was exactly 7 o'clock. The Ashfords were the kind of people who considered lateness a character flaw and earliness a sign of anxiety. Punctuality was their religion. I pulled the heavy oak door open. Margaret and William Ashford stood on the porch like statues carved from granite and old money. William, a retired federal judge, wore a dark suit that probably cost more than my first car. His posture rigid with the weight of decades of passing judgment. Margaret was draped in a fur coat that looked heavy enough to crush a smaller woman, her neck adorned with a string of pearls that glowed softly in the porch light. "Imogen," Margaret said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She offered me her cheek, a surface as cool and dry as parchment. "You look vivid." "Thank you, Margaret," I said, accepting the air kiss. "Red is a bold choice, I know, but tonight felt like an occasion for boldness." William followed, carrying a bottle of scotch in a velvet bag. He handed it to Declan, who had materialized behind me, sweating slightly in his tuxedo. "Macallan 25, William grunted. "Don't mix it with anything. Son, it is meant to be respected." "Of course, sir," Declan said, his voice jumping an octave. "I wouldn't dream of it. Thank you so much. Please, come in. Let me take your coats." As Declan busied himself with the servitude of the coat check, I watched Margaret scan the foyer. Her eyes darted to the crown molding, then to the art on the walls. She was appraising the value of my life, calculating if her daughter's friends were still worthy of the Ashford Association. "The house looks lovely," she admitted, though it sounded like an accusation. "Although, I do find this modern lighting a bit clinical." "We like transparency here, Margaret," I said, smiling with too many teeth. "No dark corners for secrets to hide in." 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time, the rhythm was hesitant. I opened the door to reveal Serena. If I was the Red Queen, she was attempting to be the White Swan. She wore a dress of white chiffon, high-necked and flowing, the kind of garment a debutante wears to convince society of her purity. It was a calculated costume, designed to deflect her parents' criticism and perhaps cleanse her own conscience, but her eyes betrayed her. They were darting, wide, and lined with the red rim of sleeplessness. "Hi," she breathed, clutching a small gift bag like a shield. "Serena," I exclaimed, pulling her into a hug that I made last exactly 3 seconds too long. I felt her body stiffen against mine. "You look like an angel. Doesn't she look innocent?" Declan, who was pouring drinks in the living room, looked up. He paled. "She looks great. Hi, Serena." "Mom and Dad are in the living room," I whispered in her ear, pulling back. "They are dying to hear your news." "What news?" she hissed back, panic flaring. "Just go," I winked, steering her toward the lion's den. The pre-dinner drinks were an exercise in excruciating social theater. We stood in a loose circle in the living room, holding crystal tumblers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and imminent disaster. Declan was performing the role of his life. He was charming, attentive, laughing too loudly at William's dry anecdotes about the incompetence of the modern judicial system. He was trying to bond with the father of his mistress, oblivious to the fact that William would likely sentence him to a firing squad if he knew the truth. "So, Declan," William said, swirling his scotch, "how is the firm I read that article about the waterfront project? Impressive scope." "It is challenging, sir," Declan said, puffing out his chest. "But we are breaking ground next month. It is all about vision. You have to see what is not there yet." "Vision is good," William nodded. "But integrity is better. You build a foundation on sand. The whole thing comes down. I have sent men to prison for 20 years because they thought they could cut corners on the foundation." Declan swallowed hard. "Absolutely. Integrity is paramount." I stepped in, placing a hand on Mrs. Ashford's arm. "That is what I admire so much about your family. Margaret, the values. You have raised Serena to be such a giving person. She is so generous. She shares everything." I paused, looking directly at Serena. "She shares her time," I continued, "her talents, even things that most people would keep to themselves. She just gives them away. It is a rare quality. Serena took a massive gulp of her wine. Imogen is too kind, she choked out. I just try to help. Oh. You help, I said warmly. You have helped Declan so much recently. I do not know what he would do without your input. Margaret beamed, oblivious to the subtext. Well, we tried to instill a sense of duty in her, although I still wish she had chosen a more traditional path. Interior design is so subjective, but she is talented, Declan interjected quickly, desperate to defend her. She has an eye for luxury. She knows exactly what a man I mean, what a client wants. Shall we eat? I interrupted, clapping my hands softly. Luke has prepared something special. We moved to the dining room. The massive projection screen I had installed dominated the far wall, currently displaying a static image of a scenic landscape. The table was set with military precision. I directed everyone to their seats. I sat at the foot of the table. Declan was at the head. Serena was to his right. Margaret across from her. William sat next to Margaret. The seating arrangement meant that Declan and Serena were flanked, with nowhere to look but at me or her parents. The first course arrived. Oysters with blood orange mignonette. They sat on the ice like cold, gray secrets. To friendship, I proposed, raising my glass. And to the truth, may it always surface. Hear, hear, William grunted, downing his oyster. As we ate, I acted as the conductor of the conversation, steering every topic toward the rocks upon which their ship was about to crash. William, I said, dabbing my mouth with the linen napkin, you spent 40 years on the bench. What was the most common lie you heard? William chewed thoughtfully. It wasn't the words, Imogen, it was the omission. People think if they don't say it, it didn't happen. But the silence is where the guilt lives. A man who cheats on his taxes, or his partner, always thinks he is smarter than the audit. But the paper trail always exists. Declan dropped his fork. It hit china with a sharp clang. Sorry, he muttered. Butterfingers. Speaking of paper trails, I said, looking at Serena. Serena was telling me the other day about a project she's working on, a penthouse in the city, a very expensive renovation. Serena froze. She looked at me with pure terror. She had never told me about the penthouse. She knew that I knew. Oh, Margaret asked, perking up. A new client. Is it a celebrity? No, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I think it is a private residence, for a couple who are starting a new life together. Isn't that right? Serena? Serena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. I am just consulting, she managed to whisper. Consulting, I repeated. That is a modest way to put it. From what I hear, you are designing the whole future, the nursery, the master bedroom, everything. Declan reached for his wine glass. His hand was trembling so badly the liquid rippled. Imogen, he said, his voice tight. Let us not talk shop. It is a party. You are right, I smiled. Let us talk about love. Margaret, you were asking me on the phone if Serena was seeing anyone. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with maternal predation. William stopped chewing. Is she? Margaret asked. Serena, you didn't tell us. Serena looked at Declan. Declan looked at his plate. It is not serious. Serena lied. Oh, I think it is very serious, I corrected her. I saw a receipt recently. For a ring, a stunning diamond, $12,500. That is not a casual price tag, is it? William whistled. 12 grand. He must be well off. Who is he? Serena. A lawyer? A banker. He is in finance. Serena stammered. In a way, I mused. He certainly knows how to move money around, but the problem is, he is currently occupied. Occupied? William frowned. What does that mean? Is he married? The word hung over the table like a guillotine blade. Married? William repeated, his voice dropping to a growl. Serena, tell me you are not involved with a married man. Serena was shaking her head frantically. No, Daddy, it is not like that. Imogen is just confused. I am rarely confused, I said coldly. But maybe married is the wrong word. Maybe duplicitous is better, or thieving. Declan's hand jerked. His wine glass tipped over. It happened in slow motion. The crystal stem snapped. The dark red liquid, a 1982 vintage that cost more than Serena's car, surged across the pristine white tablecloth. It moved like a living thing. A crimson tide spreading towards Serena's white dress. She shrieked and jumped up, grabbing her napkin to dab at the stain that hadn't even touched her yet. God damn it. Declan, William barked. Watch what you're doing. I am sorry. Declan was standing now, his face the color of ash. I will get a towel. I am so sorry. Sit down, I said. My voice was not loud, but it possessed a gravity that slammed everyone back into their chairs. I stood up. I picked up my own glass of water. I took a spoon and tapped it gently against the rim. Ting, ting, ting. The sound cut through the chaos. The room fell silent. The only sound was the dripping of the wine from the table onto the rug. Drip, drip, drip. Do not worry about the stain, I said, looking at the spreading red pool. It is just wine. It washes out. Unlike some things. I looked at the Ashfords. Then I looked at Declan and Serena. They were paralyzed, waiting for the blow. Before we serve the main course, I said, my voice steady and clear. I have a special presentation. I told you, Declan, that I wanted to show a video about our journey, about friendship, about the history we share. I reached into the pocket of my red dress and pulled out a small remote control. But history is a funny thing, I continued, walking slowly toward the screen. It depends on who is telling the story. Usually, the victors write the history books. But tonight, I pointed the remote at the screen. Tonight, the evidence tells the story. Imogen, what are you doing? Declan whispered. Please, I am sharing, I said, smiling at him. Just like Serena, I pressed the button. The lights in the dining room dimmed automatically. The projector hummed to life. A beam of light cut through the darkness. Hitting the screen, the room went black, save for the giant rectangle of light. Sit back, I commanded, and watch closely, because I will not be playing this twice. I took a sip of my water. The cool liquid soothed my throat. My heart was beating slow and steady. A war drum in the silence. The screen flickered. The first image appeared. It was not a photo of a birthday party. It was a date, October 15th, and then the music began. Not jazz, but the haunting, terrifying opening strings of Mozart's Requiem. The show had begun. The dining room descended into a heavy velvet darkness, save for the single piercing beam of light from the overhead projector. It cut through the air like a lighthouse scanning a stormy sea, illuminating the dust motes dancing in its path before slamming against the 100-inch screen. The silence in the room was not empty. It was pressurized, filled with the shallow breathing of 5 people who were waiting for a revelation. I stood by the light switch, a shadow within a shadow. I watched them. Declan leaned back in his chair, his body language shifting from terrified rigidity to tentative relaxation. He had heard my description, a journey of friendship, and his narcissism had latched onto it as a lifeline. He believed I was sentimental. He believed I was desperate to impress the Ashfords with a montage of our shared history. He believed he was safe. The video began. I had engineered the opening sequence with the precision of a trapdoor mechanism. Soft, melodic piano music drifted from the surround sound speakers, a piece by Debussy that was wistful and sweet. On the screen, high-resolution photographs dissolved into one another. There was a photo of the 3 of us at our college graduation, arms around each other, faces flushed with cheap champagne and optimism. There was a photo of my wedding day, Serena fixing my veil, looking at me with what appeared to be tearful adoration. There was a photo of Declan holding Lucas in the hospital, looking tired, but proud. The tension in the room evaporated. I saw Margaret Ashford's stiff shoulders drop an inch. She smiled, a tight, approving expression. "Oh," she whispered, "that is lovely. Look at how young you all were." "Good times," William Ashford grunted, taking a sip of his water, clearly relieved that the interrogation seemed to be over. I looked at Declan. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. He turned to Serena and gave her a microscopic nod. See his eyes said, "She is clueless. We survived." Serena offered a weak, trembling smile in return. She reached for her water glass, her hand finally steadying. "It is beautiful, Imogen," Declan called out into the dark. "Really, thank you." "Do not thank me yet," I said softly. My thumb hovered over the remote control. I waited for the perfect beat. On the screen, a photo of the three of us at a vineyard last summer faded to black. The piano music held its final note, shimmering in the air. Then, I pressed the button. The audio shifted instantly. The gentle piano was violently severed, replaced by a low, rhythmic thumping. It was the bass line of a jazz track John Coltrane. The sound was raw, unpolished, recorded not in a studio, but through the microphone of a smartphone. The screen exploded with light. It was no longer a slideshow. It was video footage. The angle was voyeuristic, shot through a narrow vertical gap. The framing was undeniable. It was the view from the hallway into my living room. The image was crystal clear. The 4,000-pixel resolution I had bragged about earlier was now serving its purpose. Every detail was magnified. On the screen, Serena was dancing. She was not wearing the white chiffon dress she wore tonight. She was not wearing anything at all. Her body was a pale flame moving against the dark background of my fireplace. She was spinning, her head thrown back in ecstasy, my diamond necklace glittering at her throat like a collar. The room did not react immediately. The human brain refuses to process trauma instantaneously. It requires a moment to reject the impossible before accepting the horrific. For 3 seconds. The only sound was the jazz music from the speakers and Serena's recorded laughter echoing around us. "Do you think she is landing now?" the on-screen Serena asked. Her voice amplified to a booming volume. She took a sip from the vintage wine glass. "She is so boring." "Declan," the on-screen voice continued, dripping with mockery. She scrambled up from her chair, knocking it backward. It crashed onto the floor. She lunged toward the projector, her hands clawing at the air as if she could physically grab the light and stuff it back into the box. "Imogen!" she shrieked, turning to me, her face a mask of terror. "Stop it! Please stop it!" I stood perfectly still. I held the remote control behind my back. "Sit down, Serena," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "The show has just started." "Turn it off," Margaret screamed now. Finding her voice, she stood up, shaking so hard her chair rattled against the table. "This is pornography. How dare you? How dare you show this filth?" "Filth?" I asked, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the video. "This is not filth. Margaret, this is your daughter. This is the woman you raised to share everything. Look at her. She is sharing her body with my husband in my house." "It is a lie," Declan shouted, finally finding his tongue. He stood up, looking wildly for the remote. "It is fake. It is AI Imogen. Turn it off." "It is not AI, Declan," I said. "And we both know it." On the screen, the video continued. The on-screen Declan pulled the on-screen Serena onto his lap. They kissed. It was wet, sloppy, and magnified to 10 feet tall. William Ashford looked away, gagging. He looked physically ill. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. "I cannot watch this," he choked out. "William, do something," Margaret wailed, burying her face in her hands. Serena ran toward me. She looked ready to tackle me. "Give me the remote," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply looked at her with such cold, absolute contempt that she stopped 3 feet away from me. She saw something in my eyes that she had never seen before. She saw the end of her life. "If you touch me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "I will upload this to every social media platform in the world before you can blink. Sit down." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her white dress, a pathetic heap of chiffon and regret. "Now," I said, turning back to the screen, "let us look at the subplot." I pressed the next button on the remote. The video of the dancing cut out. The jazz music stopped abruptly. The screen went black for a second, then filled with text, giant, white text on a black background. It was a screenshot of a text message thread. I had enlarged it so that even William, with his failing eyesight, could read every word. "Declan, God. She is so boring. It is like living with a spreadsheet. Serena. Just wait until the bonus clears. We need the cash for the Tribeca place. Declan, I know. I am just counting the days. 18 months of acting like I care is exhausting." The room went silent again. The sobbing on the floor stopped for a second as Serena looked up and saw her own words projected larger than life. "You called me a spreadsheet. Declan," I said, reading the screen. "And you were right. I am good with numbers. So let us look at the numbers." I clicked the remote again. A spreadsheet appeared. It was the forensic accounting of Lucas's college fund. $350,000, I narrated. "Stolen from your grandson's education fund, Mrs. Ashford, transferred to a shell company owned by your nephew, Thomas Miller." William Ashford's head snapped up. "Thomas!" he roared. "You involved Thomas in this." "They did not just involve him," I said. "They used him to launder money. My money." I clicked again. The deed to the penthouse appeared. The address. The price. The down payment. "And here is the nest," I said. "A $4 million penthouse, bought with stolen funds. They were planning to move in next September. After they divorced me and took custody of Lucas." "Custody," Margaret whispered, horror dawning on her face. I clicked again. The Plan B document appeared. The highlighted section about painting me as an unfit mother. Strategy. Depict mother as mentally unstable workaholic. Use travel schedule against her. Isolate child. "They were going to take my son," I said. My voice finally cracked. Not with sadness, but with rage. "They were going to take your grandson, Margaret, and tell a judge that I was crazy. They were going to use my career, the career that paid for this dinner, this house, and that wine they spilled to destroy me." Declan was shaking his head, mumbling like a madman. No, that was just talk. We didn't mean it." "You drafted it," I shouted, slamming the remote onto the sideboard. The sound made everyone jump. "You put it in a legal document. That is not talk. Declan, that is conspiracy." I walked over to the light switch. "I have seen enough," I said. I flipped the switch. The chandelier blazed to life. The sudden brightness was blinding. It stripped away the shadows, the atmosphere, and the drama. It left only the ugly, raw reality exposed. Declan stood by the table, his tuxedo stained with wine, his face gray and sweating. He looked small. He looked weak. Serena was curled on the rug, her white dress smeared with dirt from the floor, her face a ruin of mascara and snot. She looked up at her father, her eyes begging for mercy. William Ashford stood like a statue that had cracked down the middle. He was looking at his daughter not with love, but with the cold, impartial judgment of a man who had sent criminals to the electric chair. Margaret was weeping, but she was pulling away from the table, physically distancing herself from the contamination. I stood at the head of the room. My red dress was vibrant, untouched, immaculate. I felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made my fingertips tingle. "Welcome to the real party," I said, looking at the wreckage of my family and friends. "I hope you saved room for the main course. It is called accountability." The dining room was silent. but it was the silence of a bomb site immediately after detonation. The dust of my revelation hung in the air, choking the life out of the dinner party. The projector hummed a low, monotonous note, casting a stark white light over the wreckage of my marriage. Declan was the first to break the paralysis. His survival instinct, honed by years of corporate maneuvering and pathological lying, kicked in. He laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound that bounced off the walls. "This is ridiculous," he stammered, looking wildly from me to the Ashfords. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "Imogen, I do not know who you hired to make this, but it is a fake. It is AI. It is a deep fake. Everyone knows you can make these things now. That is not me. That voice is synthetic. Someone hacked our Wi-Fi." He turned to William Ashford, his eyes wide and desperate. "William, you are a man of the law. You know about evidence tampering. Imogen is tech-savvy. She created this to frame me because she is jealous. She is hysterical." Judge Ashford stood up slowly. He did not look like a dinner guest anymore. He looked like the man who had sent hardened criminals to the electric chair without blinking. He looked at Declan with a disgust so profound it seemed to lower the temperature in the room. "Shut your mouth," William roared. The volume of his voice made the crystal glasses rattle on the table. "Do not insult my intelligence, you worm," William growled, stepping closer to Declan. "I have sat on the federal bench for 40 years. I know what a liar looks like, and I know my own daughter. I know that birthmark on her lower back. I paid for the laser removal consultation when she was 12, and she refused to go through with it because she was scared of the pain." He pointed a finger at the frozen image on the screen, where the mark was clearly visible on Serena's skin. "That is Serena," William said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "And I have heard that arrogant, nasal whine of a voice of yours for 5 years. That is you. Do not dare try to gaslight me in this house." Declan shrank back, his defense crumbling instantly against the wall of William's absolute certainty. I walked over to the sideboard where I had placed the 3 heavy leather portfolios. I picked them up. They felt substantial, dense with the weight of facts. I walked back to the table. I lifted them high and let them drop. Bam! The sound of the heavy files hitting the solid oak table was deafening. It cracked through the room like a judge's gavel striking the block to announce a death sentence. "The video is just the introduction, William," I said, my voice steady and cold. I placed my hand on the first file. "This is the forensic paper trail. Your daughter did not just sleep with my husband. She conspired with him to embezzle $350,000 from my accounts, from my son's college fund." William paled, his hand gripping the back of his chair. "And she did not do it alone," I continued, relentless. "She used your nephew, Thomas Miller. She used his shell company to launder the money to buy a penthouse in Tribeca. The deed is in this file. The wire transfers are in this file. The text messages where she calls you a senile old fool are in this file." I leaned forward, looking William dead in the eye. "This is grand larceny," I said. "This is wire fraud. This is money laundering. In the state of New York, that carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison." I paused, letting the threat hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "I have the police on speed dial," I said. "I have a contact at the FBI Financial Crimes Division ready to take my call. I will send her to prison. William, I will destroy her future so thoroughly she will not be able to get a job sweeping floors. Unless what?" William whispered, his face gray. "Unless you handle it," I said. "You pay back every single cent of the $350,000 by Monday morning, and you remove her from my life permanently." Margaret Ashford let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She turned to Serena, who was still huddled on the floor, weeping into her ruined white dress. "You stole," Margaret screeched. Her voice was unrecognizable. "You stole from Imogen after everything she gave you. You acted like a common criminal." Serena looked up, her face a mess of mascara and tears. "Mom, please, smack," Margaret moved faster than I thought possible. She crossed the distance and slapped Serena across the face with the full force of her humiliation. It was a brutal, open-handed strike that knocked Serena sideways. "You have disgraced us," Margaret screamed, standing over her daughter. "You are a whore and a thief. I cannot even look at you." I turned away from them. My business with the Ashfords was concluded. I turned to Declan. He was standing by the window, looking like he wanted to jump through the glass. When I looked at him, he flinched. "And you?" I said softly. "Imogen," he started, his voice trembling. "Imogen, we can talk about this." "There is nothing to talk about," I said. "I called the bank this morning. The joint accounts are frozen. You have access to exactly $0. Your credit cards have been canceled. You cannot even buy a pack of gum." "You cannot do that," he whispered. "I earned the money." "Declan," I said, "I can do whatever I want with it. And as for your job, do not bother going to the office on Monday." His eyes widened. "What?" "I sent the forensic file to your partners an hour ago," I said, checking my watch. "They have a morality clause and an embezzlement clause in the partnership agreement. You are fired for cause, effective immediately. Security has your photograph. If you try to enter the building, they will arrest you for trespassing." Declan looked at me. Then he looked at the Ashfords, who were watching him with hatred. He looked at the screen. He realized the walls had closed in completely. He was drowning. And he did what drowning rats always do. He climbed over the other body to try to breathe. He dropped to his knees. He actually knelt on the wine-stained rug, clasping his hands together. "Imogen, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "It was her, it was Serena." He pointed a shaking finger at the woman he had claimed to love 5 minutes ago. "She seduced me," Declan shouted, his face ugly with fear. "She made me do it. I tried to stop it. Imogen, she is obsessed with you. She wanted your life. She manipulated me. I never wanted to hurt you." Serena stopped crying. The silence from the floor was absolute. She slowly pushed herself up to a sitting position. She looked at Declan. She looked at the man she had betrayed her best friend for, the man she had bought a house with, the man she was planning to marry. "Declan," she whispered. Her voice was broken glass. "What are you saying? We love each other. You said I was your muse." "I never loved you," Declan screamed at her, spitting the words out. "You are crazy. You are a psycho. You dragged me into this mess. I love my wife. I only want my wife." Serena let out a sound that was not human. It was a low, keening wail of a soul shattering. In that brutal second, she saw the truth. She had burned her entire world down for a coward who threw her to the wolves the moment he got scared. I watched them. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold, clean sense of completion. "Pathetic," I said. I looked at my watch again. "You have 5 minutes," I announced. 5 minutes to get off my property. If you are still here at 8:35, I press the button that calls the police, and I will press charges for everything: fraud, theft, trespassing. William Ashford grabbed Serena by the arm. He hauled her up like a rag doll. She did not resist. She hung limp in his grip, staring at Declan with dead eyes. "Get up," William hissed. "You are coming with us. We are driving straight to the clinic in Vermont. You are going to rehab for sexual addiction, and then you are going to a convent if I have to build one myself. You are dead to this city. Serena, do you hear me? You are finished." He dragged her toward the door. Margaret followed, clutching her fur coat tight around her throat as if it could protect her from the contamination of her own family. She did not look back. Declan scrambled up from his knees. He wiped his face with his sleeve, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Imogen," he whined, "where am I supposed to go? I have no money. I have no cards. My parents are in Florida." "That sounds like a personal problem." "Declan," I said. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the key fob for the Tesla. "I will just take the car and go to a motel," he muttered. Turning toward the door, I reached out and snatched the keys from his hand. My movement was so fast, he didn't even have time to close his fingers. The Tesla is leased in my name. Declan, I said, holding the keys up. Like the house, like the wine you spilled, like the clothes on your back. I pointed to the open front door, where the cold night air was rushing in. You walk. He stared at me one last time. He searched my face for a trace of the woman who used to make him coffee in the morning, the woman who used to hold his hand. He found only a stranger in a red dress. He turned and ran. He ran out into the dark, chasing after the taillights of the Ashfords' car. A man with nothing left but a stained tuxedo and a lifetime of regret. I walked to the front door. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the driveway. I grabbed the heavy oak door and slammed it shut. Click. The lock engaged. The silence rushed back into the house, heavy and sweet. I walked back to the dining room. The projector was still humming. The screen was black. The wine stain on the table looked like a map of a conquered country. I picked up the bottle of Macallan 25 that William had brought. I grabbed a clean glass. I poured myself a generous measure. I raised the glass to the empty room, to the ghost of my marriage, to the woman I used to be. I drank it in one swallow. It burned. It felt like fire. It felt like cleansing. I looked at the black screen one last time. Curtain down, I whispered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the drama and the justice served. Please leave a comment below, letting me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with listeners from all over the world and hear your thoughts on Imogen's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means everything.